And all the hours we spent together, I wonder will our ideals change? What would be this close forever?
Pete,
Yes.
hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Living the dream.
Awesome. Can you tell everybody your name and where you are right now, just to show everybody what an international show this is?
Yeah. All right. Keith Robinson. I was the lead singer for Psychotic Symptoms, and I am currently living in Thailand, which I believe is about 14 hours ahead of you. Although that's not a commentary on your stage in life, but but so I think it's about 9 p.m. my time, about 7 a.m. your time, or something like that. Yeah.
And what do you go by on Facebook, and why?
On Facebook, so my name is it's basically Fuck Keith, but it's spelled Phuk, and then Keith. The reason for that is because I live in Phuket, Thailand, and Phuket is spelled Phuket. So wherever I've lived in Thailand, I sort of have changed my Facebook name. I don't like using my full name. For some reason, I just feel like it's weak and unoriginal. Fuck Keith. I'm surprised Phuket. I'm surprised Facebook let me do it, but they did. So that's it.
I love it. I love the name. It's awesome. What brought you out to Thailand?
To Thailand. Well, I was in the film industry for quite a long time, and one of my best mates that I've known for quite a long time, about 20 years or so, was in Los Angeles with me for some time, and then he had moved to Thailand. I've been here for 12 years, so he was here, several years before me, and when I decided, at some point to start doing, actual vacations and leaving the country, unlike a lot of Americans, I came to see him in Thailand, and I had an amazing time, amazing people, and I came back, and then sort of I got to a point career-wise where I was at a crossroads, and I just decided to sort of pack it in and move halfway across the world, because that's just kind of how I do things. But that's the short, less boring version. Yeah.
Well, what do you like about it?
To answer your question, what drew me to it? It was just a sort of a new challenge, a new chapter. I guess I wasn't necessarily running away from anything in particular. I was more sort of running to something that without any real without any real firm idea of where it was going to go. So it's the freedom, it's the climate, the people, the fact that it was something new, and that's just kind of what I've tended to do, throughout my life.
So that's a long way from Reston.
The distance, in over time, and the distance, geographically, doesn't seem to really, affect the relationships that you built, like in your formative years when you were a kid or an adolescent or a young adult. I feel.
Well, let's talk about those formative years, and let's talk about. Yeah, let's talk about your band, Psychotic Symptoms, and how that band started and where it sort of fit inside of that Reston hardcore scene at the time.
Well, there's a lot to say about that. Well, I mean, to begin with, it wasn't my band to start. I was just a sort of a hanger on. When it was some guys that I knew, from middle school, which I went to. I went to Terracet for most of elementary. I went to Lancaster for middle school, and then I went to South Lakes for all of high school. But so I met most of the guys in the band in middle school. I specifically I can't recall how or when. It's just we kind of came to be. There was a friend that I've known since kindergarten, first grade. His name is Jamie, and he was never sort of in bands, but he was one of those guys who was if I didn't know him, I never would have met any of these guys. I never would have met, I don't know, any of this stuff would have happened, but he was the kind of guy who kind of always knew everybody. I think most people, if you ask, he was, like I said, he wasn't in bands, but he just kind of knew people, and so I met these guys, and I sort of grew up, liking metal, and these guys, I think they started messing around musically. I think maybe end of 8th grade, beginning of 9th grade. This would have been sort of 87, 88 kind of thing. But I mean, so it wasn't my band. I just kind of knew these guys, and I didn't play any instruments or anything. But Kevin Blankscore was basically the rundown of Psychotic Symptoms was this. So there was the bass player and lead singer who is his name is Brian Wilson, and then the lead guitar was Kevin Blankscore. The rhythm guitar was Steve Sklarew. And the drummer was Craig Mathis. So Kevin Blankensport, he had quite a big basement that we just used, or they just used initially, as sort of the jam spot. And they were, we all, Kevin had actual, experience playing guitar. I don't know if he had lessons or whatever, but he was quite proficient at guitar at the time. Craig Mathis was a year younger than us, but and he was the drummer. He's quite a quiet guy. I think in the time that we were together, I think he spoke maybe 5 words. I'm joking about that, but I kind of just hung out and keep in mind that that there were bands like Hostile Environment, LDK, they were already established. I think around the time that we were sort of getting together, when we were younger than most of the bands that were out there by not a lot, but a year or 2, sometimes 3 if you're talking about some of the members of LDK. So we were and we were just kind of doing it because we could. We were looking for something to do, and again, I wasn't in it initially. I just kind of hung out and listened to their practice sessions and just watched the whole thing evolve. And then sort of as they were kind of building their playlist. We never played or they never played, or we never played covers or anything like that. It was only ever originals. Not saying that that was necessarily a good thing, but that's what it always was. And at a certain point, just because I was with them every day after school during practice, the bass player and singer was trying to grapple with, doing both at the same time. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but because I was always there and because I knew their songs and I knew all the lyrics, I guess at some point, which is kind of against my personality, I at some point I got on the mic, and I'd like to say the rest is history, but it's not much of a history.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And that's kind of how it worked out, and then we just started building songs, and like I listened to metal, Kevin listened to metal, Craig listened to a very different kind of music, Steve, his music background was what he liked to listen to was pretty close to mine as well. But we were sort of, we weren't really great with playing metal, and we didn't have a lot of exposure to hardcore. So when it came to playing, writing songs and playing songs, we kind of drew off of what we knew, which was metal, but sound wise, we had no idea really what we were kind of going for. I don't know how we ended up getting known really at all, or how we ended up playing some of the shows, the garage shows that we ended up playing, and I think it was just a lot of word of mouth. There was so much musical energy going around. Just everybody and their brother, I should say, was somehow ended up in a band or closely related to a band. It was just really, really nuts. So I think we were just looking for something to do, and rather than I don't know, just screwing around outside, we just started playing music. That's kind of it. But we were younger than everybody. We didn't have a lot of musical experience, and I think that probably showed. But we were kind of like the kids when we played with LDK. It was kind of like you could clearly see musically and from the way that people were on stage and how the songs were sort of put together, you could see a clear difference. But we were just having fun, we didn't really think like, oh, we're not good enough. We just did what we could, and I'm not sure, I don't have as much Reston hardcore vocabulary, so to speak. I have a lot to say in terms of commentary, but in terms of vocabulary, the Jerry Barretts and the Pat Kennedys and like guys like that, they were in it before and they were in it well after. Jerry's still jamming today, like quite a lot, and so I've got a lot of commentary, but it's sort of in a lot shorter period of time. So I can really, I'll do the best to sort of make this interesting. But yeah.
How, if you were younger than them, how were you getting into parties and things before Jam for Man came about to see bands like Hostile Environment or LDK, to see the Jerry Barretts and the Pat Kennedys doing their thing?
Well, I mean, you know, in that time, I mean, I remember the first show that I ever went to, and you know, at the time, you know, you're not talking about shows in venues. You're talking about, you know, garage parties. So it's basically, you know, whoever's parents or whatever, you know, had a garage, and you know, and whoever's parents would allow it, and whoever's then neighborhood would allow it. So you had to get, you know, permission from, you know, an entire neighborhood. If you got a house with a garage, you know, presumably you've got a single family home, and the single family home is going to be in a neighborhood, and you know, so basically, you know, the first show that I recall going to, and I may have mentioned something before. It's like, you know, if we're getting into memories, you know, there's a lot of, you know, what we remember as kids. It can be quite a bit different. So I'll never lie, but you know, like you go back and you see your childhood home, and you know, you remember it as being, you know, not a palatial mansion or anything, but you remember it as being physically bigger than it is. Everything is it seems, you know, kind of bigger than it was, you know. So I'll you know, anytime I sort of embellish a story, or you know, especially if it's, you know, embellishing in my favor, I'll just say, like, you know, something to the effect of, you know, yeah, did I mention, like, my house is huge, and that'll be an indicator that you know, I think this is the truth, but you know, it's the truth according to me, but I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not trying to, you know, like, you know, blow sunshine at my own ass or anything, but basically, so you have these shows, and from what I remember, and remember my house is huge, the first show that I went to see, I believe, was just a garage, just, you know, a couple of bands playing at a garage party at Hallie and Whitney Dunn's house, which is over by Hunter's Woods, if my memory serves, which, you know, with the Reston pathway system, you know, even if people were too young, like 14, 15, 16, you know, without driver's license or anything, one of the brilliant things about Reston is, you know, with the path system, you could pretty much walk across Reston in you know, not much time. When you're kids, you know, like walking for an hour is nothing. So, you know, these shows were you know, pretty accessible to most people, you know, whether you were too young to drive or whatever. So this show was over by Hunter's Woods. I remember, you know, to answer your question in a shorter way, the shows that I'm talking about aren't sort of venue shows. You know, Jam for Man was open to everybody. Garage shows were open to everybody. You just had to know, you know, when the party was happening, and then you just had to get there somehow, whether it was by getting a ride or walking the path or skating the path or, you know, or whatever. So I remember the Hallie and Whitney. They were guys. They were twins. So and everybody knew them as well. So they had this show, and to my recollection, I had a huge house. To my recollection, that was the first show that I saw, and this was before we were in a band. But it, you know, it gave me a chance to hear some. You know, I think LDK played there. I'm not sure if Hostile Environment played there, but it was a whole new thing. It was like, you know, kind of kids who were, you know, my age-ish, who are just jamming out, and, you know, everything live sounds amazing, even if, you know, the tuning is off or whatever. So, you know, you've got, you know, 40, 50 people around, your kids, you know, that you know from school, and you go to these shows, and so that's kind of how it was. I mean, I do remember my first show, but it wasn't Reston. the Reston shows were pretty much garage, so they were open to everybody.
At that show, were you influenced at all by what Andy Wells was doing?
I mean, I think if anybody, I mean, Andy was sort of I mean, all of LDK really were sort of special talents. I mean, there was even up to kids. I mean, their first demo sort of blew people away, and because I don't think anybody was really putting out demos at the time. I think Hostile Environment had a demo out as well, but they were easily the most known. They were 1, 2, 3 years older than we are, and when they just seemed like, I don't know, to me, like, I mean, I think I saw them before, I was even in a band, but they just seemed like sort of gods. They seemed like musically sort of put together, and they sort of spoke to people. I mean, Andy specific. I mean, how Mike Munoz and Craig Thompson played off of each other. I mean, you're talking about if I'm say, I don't know, 15, these guys would have been like 16, 17, and musically, you had like Mike and Craig, playing off of each other, and both doing solos and rhythm, and playing punk music. And Andy's voice was just there was a musicality, there was an angst, there was a desperation and a strength in it. It was, I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, influence-wise, I don't think anybody would be able to say in that time that there wouldn't have been some influence or some, I don't know, infatuation or some just absolute respect, even if that wasn't your type. I mean, Reston, it wasn't just hardcore. You had Crunchy Water was sort of more folky and rock and incredibly talented. Then you have like bands like Asphyxia, which were through and through metal. You had I don't know if those guys would have been influenced by any, but was I when we were doing writing our songs? Was it influenced by Andy or LDK? Not specifically, but the respect, the respect for them and a lot of other bands, Avail, Hostile Environment. I mean, there were so many bands. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, massive respect. I don't know about personal influence because I don't think we could have been talent-wise. I don't think we could have been influenced by that, and certainly vocally for me, I was kind of making it up as I went along. I found, you know, whatever voice I had just because that's the first thing that came, you know, that came out of my out of my throat when I opened. I was like, I'm not going to talk, and I certainly can't, you know, sing. So this is what you're going to get. Yeah.
Did the band already have the name Psychotic Symptoms when you joined? And who named the band?
Oh, that's a good one. I want to say that, I mean, definitely, I'm not sure. Oh, man, that's a good one. That's one of those fundamental questions that you should probably know the answer to. But yeah, wow. I feel like, I mean, definitely Kevin Blank. I think it was a bit of a collaboration. I don't think it was any one person. I feel like that because I remember when we were writing this song that I might have had some influence in it even before I was in the band. Because I think we were all just kind of kicking it around. But I know Kevin Blankenship for sure. I think he wrote a lot of the lyrics for the song Psychotic Symptoms. And then, you know, that was sort of like as that was coming about, I joined right around that time. So there was a bit of collaboration. You know, if I'm getting this wrong, my house was huge. Yeah, but I want to say that, like, I for sure Kevin had a part in it. I like to think that I had a part in it, but I'm not 100% on that.
What was the first show that you ever played with the band?
Oh man, oh geez. Okay, the first show that Psychotic Symptoms ever did was I don't want to make anyone jealous, so I want to just make sure that nobody thinks that I'm talking up at myself, but it was at the Langston Hughes. I don't know if it was like a fall dance or a spring dance or something like that, but it was at the middle school, the Langston Hughes Middle School dance, and I don't know how we got it, but I mean you had the whole gym that was sort of emptied out, and you had like 7th and 8th graders who were, coming to this show. And I think, obviously the administration that whoever decided to take us on was either a clown or a DJ or somebody else dropped out such that, we were the only other option. But I also don't think that they had any clue what they were getting into. They just thought we were, we didn't look super rough at the time. Kevin had a little bit of long hair. I was rocking a pretty nasty mullet for kind of most of the time. So yeah, I would say the entire time that the band was active. But the first show was a dance for Langston Hughes, and we didn't have many songs at the time. I think we had 6 or 7 songs. And the plan was to do 3 songs and then then a break and then the final 3 songs and we were sort of in it. They put us on a sort of a small stage in the middle of the gym, and so all these 12 and 13-year-olds were around us in their tuxedos and dresses and whatnot, and we got through. As soon as we started playing, there was zero movement from any of the kids. They had no idea what to expect, and we were sort of
There's no pit? No tuxedo pit? I said there was no tuxedo pit?
No, we weren't savvy enough we didn't have a lot of style like that in the day, and we were just kind of making our way through. We weren't thinking about our image and our mark on the world kind of thing. We were just like, oh, we got a show, so let's do this. But yeah, it was that. So we got through the first 3 or 4 songs or whatever, and then we had a break, and then we got kicked out. They told us.
I know. If you were savvy, you would have known not to take a break, because you would have known there was no way they were letting you back on stage after a break.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whose idea the break was. I don't know if there was a timing for it or whatever, but yeah, it was a kind of a smack in the face. We kind of didn't care, but it wasn't like we didn't care in a super punk rock kind of way. Like, yeah, let's jam this down their throats. We were sort of figuring stuff out too, and we knew that we were in the wrong place. But I think maybe to their credit, the administration was just like, yeah, this is not what we had in mind at all. And they just told us to go home, so we did. But I mean, it's a funny story to tell. But yeah, we got booted from a middle school dance, which was our first show. So it wasn't a great introduction to what could be. But yeah.
Were there a lot of shows, a lot of garages and house parties and everything like that in between that set and when you played the first Jam for Man?
I think I've been racking my brain about this. I'm not even sure which of the Jam for Mans we played for. I want to say it was 3 or 4, but I'm not entirely. Maybe it was 2. I don't even know. I do remember being at Jam for Man 1. Because there's a photo, like on your site, there's your Facebook site. There's a photo of me sitting in all my mulleted glory next to Spooky on the floor in the audience. So I had the Jam for Men T-shirt and everything. So I know I was there. But I want to say we played the 3rd or the 4th one, but I'm not exactly sure. So I don't even know if Psychotic Symptoms was a thing during the first one. It may have just been coming around. As far as shows go, I mean, as I said before, I've got a lot of commentary on it, but I don't have a lot of vocabulary, and because the reason for that is that we didn't, if I could remember, all the shows that we played, it wasn't like we played 30, 50 shows or anything like that. There were no Avail in all their various different band members
incarnations
they have and coming and even LDK, they were pretty well established. They were still playing garage shows to their credit, but they were sort of growing and they would sort of do studio stuff. For us, I mean, we weren't around for very long. The fact that we even got invited to Jam for Men, I think was more about Jam for Men and less about us. It was more about what was happening musically in Reston. The fact that there was just an avalanche of music and bands that were coming to pass. So we played garage shows. I'm not talking about the this stupid middle school dance show, but I think we probably played maybe 3 or 4 garage shows. We played Jam for Men, which was far and away the most people we played for. I have I have a few memories from Jam for Men that stand out, and I feel like. So anyway, that's the answer to that question. I do have some more memories of the Jam for Men that we played in, but I don't know which one it was. The shows leading up to it, I think it was maybe 3 or 4. They were just garage shows, and just kind of a bit laid back, and just because there was just a lot going on musically strangely in Little Reston, and yeah.
But you had a little bit more experience by the time you got on stage at Jam for Man.
Well, you'd like to think. I mean, yes. One of the things that sort of my friends and I had sort of joked about, and people didn't joke with me about it, outside the band or outside of my closer group of friends didn't joke with me about it at the time because it would have ruined me. But I kind of knew it was true, and yet I was, I think I was just sort of frightened in general because it was, I kind of was just like, how did I ever end up, what I can't remember the time in that practice where I decided to stand up and start singing in Kevin's garage. But, then you get to, you play somehow, you play a middle school show, you play a couple garage shows, and you sort of, start building up a little bit, and you write a few more songs, and, you're sort of figuring out your way, and you think, yeah, okay, a little bit more experience, and then Jam for Man is, for my recollection, and again, my house was huge. What I recall being the case was that the Reston Community Center had a capacity of 500 people, and I remember somebody saying to me that there were about 800, actually about 800 people in there. So we had a bit more experience, yes. Jam for Men was it was sort of on everybody's radar. Like if you could play at Jam for Men, it was sort of it was a confirmation that not that you had made it, but that you were recognized, that people knew who you were, and that you were accepted to sort of be in the lineup. My recollection from the show, that the Jam for Men that we played, was that there were 7 or 8 bands. I want to say 7, and I think we were third or fourth, and LDK was the headliner. as far as experience goes, getting back to your question, I tend to drift off. Sorry, but as far as experience goes, you'd like to think, but I will say this about people not joking about it outside the band, but within my stage presence, with the vast amount of experience that we had at that point, that's a bit of sarcasm, was so basically, like, if there was a race that started at 0 and ended at stage presence, I would have gotten confused and run backwards. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I had 0 to negative amounts of stage presence. So what I basically did is, you see these action shots of, like Use It Today and, Warzone and, bands like these in these, CBGBs and 930 Club and all these, these great venues. And, you got this, like, they're kind of, the singers sort of out in the, getting out into the audience, and, you've got his sort of, the mic in his hand, and it's sort of, it's tipped up. So it's like, the mic is at his mouth, but the mic is being held up, so it's going, like, to the sky. So I had all of that except for everything. I only had the mic part. So I basically stood there, but I had the mic in action pose, but I didn't have any action. So it was kind of ridiculous. So I mean, we played Gentleman, quite well, but like my part, I didn't do really well to sort of to like to be the I don't know, the face of the band, if you will.
What were those? You said that you had like 3 or 4 memories or images that stand out from playing. What were those?
Well, one was just the notion or the idea that I already mentioned, which was that there was it was absolutely filled, and it was filled to capacity, and what I recall is and then some. So at that point, Gentleman 1 had great bands playing in it, but the word hadn't really gotten out. By the time we played, and this is the people that played before us are the ones that it wasn't Psychotic Symptoms in any way, shape, or form bringing people to the show. It was the lineup was pretty much LDK, but it was with the previous 1, 2, or 3 that came before it, and it was sort of anybody who's currently playing had an opportunity. If anybody had an opportunity to play in Gentleman, like it was kind of a it was a proud moment to be asked and then to be on stage. We had, there were some guys that were sort of in the front row. So again, to answer your question, so the first one was the amount of people that were in there. We had played some garage shows, and you have some whoever even if it's quite a big party, it's whoever's watching you is confined to the opening of the garage. Because you're in the garage and you're playing outwards, and so there may be people out on the driveway or out on the field, but you don't see those people. The only people you see, even if there's 50 to 100 people in total at the place, is the 20 or so people that are directly in front of you. So you have to jam for men. It was at the minimum it was filled to 500 people, and there were just people that just kind of came over it came over walls and from the back, snuck in or whatever. So there were just loads and loads and loads of people. So that's memory one. Memory two is there were, when we started to play, there were some people that were sort of hecklers. That one of Steve, again, this is just a recollection. I don't know if it's 100% true, but there was some guys from a neighboring town and school that had some beef with one of the guys in the band, and they were sort of standing in the front. And when we started playing, between the first and second song, I think they were they were just heckling us, basically, like we were a first time comedian on a stage, and some other people sort of shut them down. But with that many people, it wasn't just Reston. There were people from Herndon, and there were people from sort of all around. The word about Jam for Man had sort of gotten out, and it was a good thing to do for the community and for the homeless and whatnot. So that's another memory. The other memory I have is that we were a bit worried that we weren't the first, second, or I think we were fourth. We might have been third, but either way, we weren't the first or second band to play. And let's just say we were the fourth band to play. The first two, maybe three bands to play, there was, this was sort of like, back in the day where, sort of mosh pits were sort of prevalent. And with that many people, what you normally would see is, if you have Safari Club or 930 Club, you have, quite a small venue, and you have people, and the mosh pits were quite, sort of small and violent, but the community center was quite big, and it was big, quite open, and there were 500 to 800 people in there. So you had what you would expect was quite a large mosh pit, and without a lot of violence, but a lot of people sort of moving in a circle, sort of I think it moved sort of counterclockwise is my recollection. But the first two or three bands that played, there was no movement at all. There were just observers. And I'm not saying that it was, because of our, musical prowess that it changed us. But when we got on, it was the first from that night. It was the first pit that occurred was during our set. And I think it started happening in the second or third song. And just people, I don't know if they, if they liked us or if they were just warmed up or whatever, but it stands out in my memory as like nobody was moving, and no discredit to the first few bands. I think it was more about the people. But when we started playing, people loosened up, and it was the first pit. And it, when you see sort of, 300 people moving around, just it's like a vortex. It's just this crazy thing. So as I'm standing there with my stupid mullet and my lack of stage presence, I'm looking out and I'm just seeing this massive, whirlpool of people move around, and it was huge, man. Like I'll never ever forget that. Yeah.
Do you remember the songs that you were playing and what, kind of made people go crazy like that?
At the time, World at War and Psychotic Symptoms specifically, just from the few shows that we had, and I got a lot of sort of praise from the older guys, and I don't know if it was just them trying to be nice or whatever, but guys from like LDK and they were like, they were like, I really, really like your voice. And I don't know if they were just sort of stroking me or whatever, but it was a massive ego boost. Not that I ever developed an actual ego, but I don't know. I think maybe it was more the timing than us or any particular song that we were playing. we had played enough that people, and we made a demo at some point as well, but there were enough people that knew the songs, a few of the songs that we played, that it was enough. And, again, the timing of it. At some point, the audience is going to get lubed up enough to start moving. So I think we were just lucky to be at that spot.
How did you make that demo?
Which version? We had someone make the demo for us initially, and we were really, really excited about it. And we did it on 4-track, and we split some tracks and things like that. But we really kind of didn't know exactly. We put a lot of trust, in the sound of it, because there were some other demos that came out that were made by this person, and so we kind of just but so the end result was we were young enough and silly enough to think that we kind of knew everything. We weren't sort of happy with the sound, the end result of the demo. So we decided to remix it ourselves, which was an amazing idea. So I actually have a copy, digitized. It's on my computer. I have a copy of the first version. I have a copy of the second version, and leading up to this interview, I've listened to both of them ad nauseum, and I will say that the one that I like the most is neither one of them. But we had a sort of someone's. What do we call them back in the day? Like a boom box or whatever. Like somebody had one of those down in our practice space, and occasionally we would record our practice sessions, and I quite like the sound of our practice sessions being recorded through a tiny mic in the boom box more than either of the demos. But the demos, it was the same demo, but it was just one was recorded by so and so, and one was sort of re-recorded or remixed by us, and each of them has a something that's better than the other, but neither of them are particularly good.
At what point did Brian wind up leaving the band, and why?
Brian left the band fairly early on, and it's not due to any internal struggle or whatever. His family just moved away, so his family moved to South Carolina, and then we were without a bassist. So it's kind of fun. We were peaked. We were just trying to figure things out. Kevin had he had like a Fender Strat guitar, and he had some training. Steve, the rhythm guitarist, he started off with sort of a quite cheap guitar, but then he was getting better and better, quite a lot better, quite fast. And he ended up, I think he bought a Steve Vai or a Carbon, I think it was. It was quite a nice one. Brian's bass, I think he bought. There was, at the time there was no, there were no like classifieds online or anything like that. It was, the Reston Times had a classified section. I think he bought something, that didn't have a brand name, but I think he's like spray painted his bass black and stuff. So, I bought some proper PA equipment. But when Brian left, we were without a bass player, and this was sort of after LBK had put out their first demo, before they had put out their second demo, or right around the time They were about to put out their second demo. And Chris Moschke, who was the original bassist for LDK, and had played bass on their first demo, had left the band in the circumstances of which I do not know, and Jerry Barrett then took over for the rest of the run for them. So he was free, and we were thinking, shit, let's see if this, LDK bassist would even contemplate joining like a little band like ours, and he was quite happy to. So Brian left just because his family moved away. Chris came in, and then Chris did the demo with us. Yeah.
Did the sound of the band change with Chris joining, or did the vibe change in any way?
No. We were quite happy to have him. He had his own equipment, and he'd been playing for longer than certainly Brian had been playing. We weren't around long enough after that to experience a lot of change. But what did happen was, and why we ultimately ended up sort of folding was, so within their instruments, and without disparaging anyone, like Kevin had the most experience with bass, but it should be noted that probably you talk about fighters, pound for pound, this is the best fighter in this class or whatever. I'd say in my estimation, like pound for pound, the most talented musicians in Psychotic Symptoms were Kevin and Craig Mathis. The drummer was mind blowing. So I think whatever respect we got from the street or from other bands was just people sort of being in awe of this guy that nobody really knew. He wasn't outspoken. He was a very, very quiet guy. I don't even know how or when he learned to play drums, but I mean he was like jamming like double bass stuff, like switching double bass in and out of songs before we even really kind of understood the concept of how to do it and why to do it and things like that. And so as far as the change musically with the band, Chris didn't affect that. What we were starting to get a little, a bit better, in a musical sense. I have a song that was not on the demo that was a new song that we were working on that was probably the favorite song that I have from the band, but nobody ever heard it out. Or it certainly wasn't on any demos, and musically it was probably our best song. But what was happening was around the time that Chris started coming in, that we had already done the demo, but Craig started to not only was he hyper talented as a drummer, but he had his own opinions, which we unfortunately we kind of ignored. But he didn't come from like purely punk rock and purely metal. He had a lot of diverse musical taste that spanned from I don't know, like mod stuff, like quite diverse musical background. And he really did express to us an interest, like he wanted us to listen to him. And he wanted us to consider some different ideas, and we just kind of, I think we sort of just bulldozed them. Not we didn't, we were kids. We didn't intend it to be mean. We didn't intend to shut him up. We just didn't feel like like what he was talking about was what we were, what the band had been. But it would have been really, really smart for us to listen to him. because he could have added a huge. I don't know what direction it would have gone, but I mean, just listening to another opinion could have really, it could have made him happy, and it could have, it could have certainly helped us musically. So he ended up actually, before we broke up finally, he ended up leaving because he was a bit frustrated, and rightfully so, because he was just in the background being an amazing drummer. I think he was honestly, being 3-4 years younger than a lot of the other people out there, him because he was younger than us. I think as a drummer goes, with some of the, I think he would have easily been sort of top 3 in my mind. There were guys like Rob, who played with Transilliance, and who was just like jazz influence, played in metal band. I mean, like that's a whole other level. But this guy, he could have pulled some of that stuff off. I mean, he was held back massively by us. So Chris didn't change the direction of the band. To keep it short, the band was starting to get a little bit more musical and smarter in terms of song structure and things like that. We had an opportunity to sort of listen to our drummer and consider some other options. We didn't, and he left. We brought in a guy that we didn't really know, who had an amazing drum set, but not really the sort of skill to back it up. And then it kind of just petered out. I mean, we never played a show. I think we played maybe one show with the new drummer, but that was pretty much it.
Man, that is a shame, but some things that just they run their course, and they just fit in a certain place and time. And in some ways, you just wound up like you just were there at the perfect place and time.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I feel very, very fortunate that that we were able to do Jeff. I mean, we didn't. I mean, I didn't. There were Kevin, the lead guitarist in the band. He didn't stop. After Psychotic Symptoms, I didn't stop after Psychotic Symptoms. Steve, the rhythm guitarist, he didn't stop. There was, I think, there was a band called Backlash that had Kevin and Steve and a good buddy of mine, Jason Browning, who played in a lot of bands at the time too. But more importantly, he's still playing music today. He's going to play with Transilliance at the show in July 21st, 2019. And he is an incredibly gifted guitarist. He played with HR from Bad Brains on a solo project that toured around America. He toured and recorded and played with the founding members of COC, Corrosion of Conformity, in North Carolina, not too long ago, and they recorded. But there were guys around who were sort of under the radar, but that are still playing, today. So I think they started a band called Backlash. I was in a band with Steve from Psychotic after Psychotic Symptoms that was called Step Aside, and that was a very, very different. I had started to get massively into New York hardcore, which massively affected what I was listening to and what my influences were. And so we had this short-lived band, and we did a four-song demo. With the drummer was Carter Blitch, who went on to play with JFA, and our bassist was John Schaefer. But that was solely based on like the influence was 1,000% New York hardcore. So you're talking like power chords and it changed my voice. It was a lot more, shorter, stronger. I mean, I basically like modeled myself after like a burly lumberjack kind of thing. But I mean, there, so yeah, the Psychotic was a small sort of chapter. We tried to do something, after that. But a lot of these guys, went on to do, a lot more things. Avail went through a lot of people, and a lot of those people played in bands before and played in bands after. There were, like hostile environment. You have like Pat Kennedy. You want to play with, Remission, and Knothead was quite, a little bit earlier, and their drummer was Carter, who, ended up being our drummer, and the second band was Step Aside. It's called Step Aside. And then Andy Wells, from LDK, he passed away. Then Avail moved to Richmond. Remission moved to Richmond. A lot of folks moved to Richmond, and there was a really busy, active period in Reston from, I would say, sort of the heyday would have been probably sort of 86 to 90. And then, most of the commentary that I would have is just, why did all this happen? Why was all of this activity happening in this, suburb of DC? This one suburb. It wasn't happening with all of the suburb towns. It was, mostly happening with Reston. There was a New York hardcore scene that was coming up. There was a DC hardcore scene that was coming up. There were a lot of guys, from DC that were, in bands that were coming in and hanging out in Reston, and vice versa. There were a lot of guys. I wasn't cool enough. Certainly, I had a mullet, so I wouldn't have been allowed. But there were a lot of guys from Reston hanging out in DC and vice versa, but it wasn't like, all of the suburbs, I'm not saying that there were no bands in any other towns, but I mean, Reston was a really hot spot, and there was a lot of diversity, and I racked my brain for years trying to figure out why it happened, when it happened. So when you say, sort of right place, right time. Yeah, absolutely. And I never understood really why until I was talking to my buddy Jason about it, and I was like, man, just don't get, why that happened. And, I get more when it happens than why it happened on that level. And there were people that just knew people that were being sort of pulled into bands that never had any interest in, and everybody sort of had a voice. You had, Reston was this sort of, melting pot of socioeconomic, statuses and cultures and ethnicities and at that time you live in a planned community, and everybody's got access. And this is before there's no like social media and anything, but you had kids who were given an opportunity, I don't know, from their parents or whatever, to really express themselves, and and that's how quite a lot of people in one sort of 5-6 year period did. Not to say that it ended in 1990. There's quite a lot of people that are still playing to this day, and obviously Avail went on to record, and Spooky is he's still quite active, as you know. So it didn't end there, but that proliferation was just madness. And we ended up in the middle of it, but we were not a big part of it. We weren't a big player in this game. We just happened to be able to be involved with some of the people that were.